Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. And oh my goodness, everything is exploding. Free agency is upon us. And everybody but Kawhi seems to have a home. And bad news, I'm probably going to say, if your team spent money, we're probably going to say they're wrong. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, found most places as Nerd Numbers. With me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's going on, Dre? And it is July 2nd, so we've had, almost 48 hours of free agency now. And like you said, most of them have gone somewhere now, except for Kawhi. So we're going to go through all the teams and see who we like and dislike so far. Although this is going to be a snapshot in time, it's really hard to say, what teams are going to look like at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we are in an interesting spot where we can point out where we think teams may have misspent their money.
Yeah.
To poke at ourselves, I've made this note before on players such as, how am I dropping that? Al Horford's a perfect one, Paul Millsap even. There are cases where we think a team overpays for a player, but that doesn't always line up with success. Meaning Al Horford is a perfectly competent player in the playoffs, and if you happen to have a good rookie like Jason Tatum, it all comes out in the wash, right? It doesn't matter. There's still a good team. And so a lot of the analysis we're giving now, I give you credit to this, is saying we're going to be bashing kind of economic things or, oh my goodness, that's a horrible long-term idea in the case of Horford, right? Horford, as an example, signed with Philadelphia or is slated to go to Philadelphia, I believe, on a 4-year deal. And what we're basically noting is that we don't think that contract's worth it, but that's not to say that Philadelphia next year won't be in good shape. I think what you've got, and hopefully is mostly updated, is a nice Reddit post, and we'll just go kind of as quick as our fancy allows to see which teams we like, and hopefully you'll be going with Boxscore Geeks, and as you mentioned, Spotrac might have it. So that'll basically be this week's show. I'm going to take an audible, though, and jump the queue, so to speak, Brian, and go with Golden State Warriors because your team will be better than the Bulls post-Jordan, in large part because Curry and Draymond are still around. But did Kevin Durant leaving cause a bunch of stuff, and I think that's the biggest story and we should start with. So let's see if I can get everything correctly. Andre Iguodala was traded to the Memphis Grizzlies, ostensibly for cap space, if I have that right.
Yeah, they did that trade as part of a three-way deal as part of this. Well, let me give one disclaimer first. These are all deals that are reported now in the media as are going to take place when they can actually do it, which is on the 6th, which is 4 days from now. So stuff can change and get blown up, but it's like 90% sure most of this is going to happen now, right? So, yes, here's what happened. Andre Iguodala got moved as part of this three-way deal to send Kevin Durant on the sign and trade to Brooklyn. And
Kevin Durant is obviously going to Brooklyn.
Yeah, Deangelo Russell coming to the Warriors on a max deal, and then Iguodala going to the Memphis Grizzlies, where he probably won't stay, it sounds like, although I love that team, sneak preview on when we get to them on what they're doing. He's probably going to go to someone like the Lakers or some good team. So, yeah, he's probably going to factor into deciding the finals once again in some way or another next season.
I love Andre Iguodala, and I think he was good last season, but you do hit this point with old players where you're just like, it's got to be done. And then, of course, Jordan Bell is walking out the door as well to Minnesota. He wasn't matched. Let's give a little silver lining. I believe the Warriors are picking up Kevon Looney. Again, just extending him, which is maybe good. They're picking up Willie Cauley-Stein for a song, which is great. Sorry, my nose is just really itchy. Picking up Kevon Looney for a song,
Yeah, $5 million for 3 years, $15 million total, absolute steal. I cannot believe Looney signed that.
It's really good, but the biggest problem with the Warriors is obviously you lost Durant, you're getting back Deangelo Russell, and they're apparently going to offer Klay Thompson the max deal. And Klay Thompson is okay. So by the way, this we're going to do a preemptive shout out. Chris Ye, friend of the show, prognosticator galore. We got to give some credit. So Chris Ye, on his episode last week, obviously we had him in to discuss Anthony Davis to the Lakers, the first big piece of news that dropped this offseason. He basically said a few things. He said, in terms of the Lakers not having cap space, he anticipated that they were going to basically trade, Mo Wagner and another couple of stragglers to the sense that they were only going to have LeBron James, Kyle Kuzma, and Anthony Davis on roster, trade everybody else, and free up max space for that third star, which most people are anticipating as Kawhi at this point. I would say the real telltale sign, it's not the prognosticators on ESPN, it's not the inside source on Twitter or Reddit, it's the betting odds. Vegas really seems to be pushing hard on this, and I will give Vegas some credit. The same kind of thing happened right before Anthony Davis went there. Like, Vegas suddenly was like, hey, the Lakers look like a favorite to win the title. And you're like, what's going on? And then boom.
Oh, are we done with the Warriors? Okay, I'll go to the Lakers. Because I have more to say. I don't. You cut off a complete tangent in a tangent. Apologies. I know I incepted you. Well, here's what I was going to say. So Chris Yan last week's show mentioned that, that was what the Lakers were going to do. Mentioned that the Nuggets were going to give a max to Jamal Murray, which they are apparently offering. And then we didn't get this on air, which was a bummer. We do this all the time with guests, right? We wind down, we end the show. And then as we're saying goodbye and saying, oh, till next time, Chris gave some names that he thought the Lakers should approach to try and sign on the team. Obviously, Kawhi being one, Danny Green being another who is on the radar, and Patrick Beverley, although Patrick Beverley has now signed. And I was like, holy cow, Chris has done these three great things. To tie it back to Kevin Durant and Clay, though, Chris Ye, get well soon, did rupture his Achilles, and I believe went into surgery today. So we're hoping him a speedy and good recovery. But, he gets to join all-time greats like Kobe Bryant for injuries, and hopefully he'll come back okay from that. But then hopping back to the Warriors, who I was trying to stay on, we have no idea how Klay Thompson is going to come back from his injury. And as we noted, ACL versus Achilles, I get that confused because the Warriors had both last season with Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson. Hope I tied that all together, Brian. Well, where do you want to go now?
Let's stick on the Warriors because say the rough part with the Warriors is you now have Deangelo Russell and Klay Thompson to ostensibly max deals as far as I can tell. And that is really not a good thing. That is really not the place you want to be. Losing, say, Andre Iguodala, Jordan Bell, and Kevin Durant and replacing them with those two is really not a sign for success. And we had some meta points we had about this that you and I have been banging back and forth. The please be true Warriors fan take is Deangelo Russell is not the final destination for the Warriors. The final destination is to use him in a trade. And basically they were kind of doing, you were telling me this, they were basically doing an asset swap, right? We're going to turn Kevin Durant into Deangelo Russell. Deangelo Russell is an asset. We can trade Deangelo Russell in the future, which intuitively seems like it would make sense given that they have Curry under contract. How many more years? 2 or 3?
Yeah, so let's go to their page here on Spotrac. Steph Curry is signed through 2021, 3 more years.
Okay, so 3 more years of Curry. They just extended that max to Clay. Now, where it gets interesting on Deangelo Russell is what we'll say is last year, I believe, Chris Ye brought this up on last week's show, he was an average player. And that might actually be good news for the Warriors because here's the bad news for anybody that likes Deangelo Russell, thinks he's an all-star. He's not. I mean, he made it to the team, but whatever. That was a travesty. Deangelo Russell is a bad shooter. He's around 53% true shooting. The average NBA team was 56% last year. This is a point we get back to all the time. This is a point I was called crazy at by Neil Payne over at 538, which is, you look at Kobe and you say, if I replace their shots with an average player's shots, how well would the team do? And now the way we phrased it when I made that piece that I was called crazy for is I said, imagine there was an average player, replacement level player, hypothetically, that had the same career as Kobe. That player would be, I think, right behind Kobe on the all-time scoring list. Now, the counter argument is, it's ridiculous to assume a replacement level player could play as long as Kobe. And you know what? Hands in the air, we agree. But Kobe Bryant's shooting, especially as his career ended, his shooting was replaceable. And so is Deangelo Russell. If you cannot replace Deangelo Russell's 20 shots a game with average shots, you are doing something wrong, and that would be better for the team. Now, the good news to the Warriors, though, right, is he's going to be lower down in the queue, in theory, behind Curry and Clay. So he might actually improve next season if he shoots less. And the other hopeful, right, is that he's actually just a stepping stone. Maybe they keep him until Clay gets healthy and then trade him off. Of course, the rough part there is you are still stuck with Klay Thompson, an injured Klay Thompson who we have no idea how he's going to come back from injury.
Yeah, and just to finish up their transactions, they also have signed Glenn Robinson III, who's kind of in the same boat as Willie Cauley-Stein, like a young player that's been pretty good so far, but maybe will play, maybe won't. In terms of their draft, they drafted two guys that were not very good in college at all. They drafted Jordan Poole from Michigan and Eric Paschal, who's supposed to be like Draymond Green, but he doesn't rebound, so I don't know why that comparison is there. The one good guy they drafted is Alan Smailagic, who played for them in the D-League, or sorry, now it's the G-League last year, but was so young that he hasn't been drafted yet. So now he has been drafted by the Warriors, and, he's young, so who knows. But yeah, to get back to the Russell stuff, it's like, so he's only 23, and he was someone who was pretty good in college. Like, maybe he will improve and be better, to be an above-average player on a team like the Warriors where you have Curry as the focus, right? But why pay him a max contract in that case, right? Why not give him a minimum deal like Willie Cauley-Stein? That's who I see him as, is a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein or Glenn Robinson, a young player who's been okay, but hasn't shown much yet. So, and yeah, let's go back to Spotrac to see the problem with this here.
$60 million, by the way, combined to Deangelo Russell and Klay Thompson on that team. That is,
and then 40 to Klay Thompson. So they've got almost 141 million in guards alone next season.
Curry. 40 million goes to Steph Curry.
I'm sorry. 40 million to Steph Curry. So between the three of those and Sean Livingston, who's probably going to retire, they've got like 140 million in guards and 20 million in forwards and 8 million in centers, right? So we've talked about this before. It's a roster where you can just get lucky with your centers. Like maybe Cauley-Stein will do well, but but anytime you sign a player to a contract and bring him in, it's like you're rolling a dice, right? And they could do well, they could do poorly. And if you pay more money for him, it's like you get to roll more dice. You get more odds of doing well. But then when you pay no money at all for your big players, it's like you're just rolling one dice and you better hope you do well. You're hurting your odds.
I'll counter that a little. So first off, I want to shout out, I actually did write a piece this week. It's a piece that I've been meaning to write for almost the entirety of Kevin Love's tenure in Cleveland. But it is this point that I hate that in the annals of Golden State Warrior history, that the Kevin Love for Klay Thompson trade is not viewed more as a mistake. Again, throwing back to Chris Ye last week, he talked about an investor piece of advice. I'm forgetting the name. Apologies. I think it was Gurley is the last name. But he was saying that this investor kept track of mistakes. And the way he called it a mistake wasn't when they invested in a stock that went to zero. It was, we missed out on Google or missed out on Facebook, et cetera. And in our opinion, the Klay Thompson for Kevin Love trade should be kind of that in NBA history. Very similar to, say, the Tyson Chandler trade that OKC balked at the last second. The reason it's not, though, and I wrote this in the piece to just break it down, was a few reasons. One is Draymond Green, who was a decent bench player. That's what we would have agreed with. Our numbers said it. Mainstream would have agreed with it. Draymond Green is a decent bench player. He turned into a good power forward. He basically turned into a good version of Kevin Love. Not as good as Kevin Love at his peak, but good. And then very good in 2016. That year they went on a run. Side tangent, I'll try and get back to the main one, Brian, again. Draymond Green and Harrison Barnes have to be two players in NBA history that have maximized one amazing season, because they've both gotten paid really well. And probably, I think Harrison Barnes, I forget who was picked up, but it's a lot of money, I believe. And Draymond Green is certainly going to get paid next offseason, I believe, as well. These two players had an amazing 2016. And while we like Draymond Green, we think he's above average, I don't think we'd put him in that level. And we haven't liked Harrison Barnes since 2016. Both still get paid. So both those players are getting a lot from that. That's the point. You had a bench player in Draymond Green who came out of nowhere to play amazing. You had a change in the CBA that restructured how good Klay Thompson's contract was, because it was bad initially and then turned into decent to good eventually. And then because of Klay Thompson's contract being that way, they were able to sign Kevin Durant. But notice that we think it was a mistake that they went with the overrated scorer in Klay Thompson 5 years ago or 4 years ago, however long it was. But it took three things lucking them into it not being a mistake. The Warriors have now committed, as you noted, $60 million in cap space to Klay Thompson and Deangelo Russell. I don't know if they can luck out the same way as they did before. That's the first problem. And second off, what I should stress, and kind of, I didn't make this more overt in the piece, but something you and I have been talking a lot about this week, Brian, is it frustrates me when a team makes a poor decision and then winds up lucky, almost irrespective of that decision, and then uses it to justify that decision. Here's some examples. So way back in the day, the Lakers, right, they traded for Kwame Brown. They had Caron Butler, who was a good draft pick and turned into a good player, not a star by any means, but a very good player. And they ended up trading him away for Kwame Brown. Now, they ended up trading Kwame Brown for Pau Gasol, and that's great. And you could say, see, it was all worth it, right? They traded for Kwame. Kwame was involved in the Pau Gasol trade. It wasn't a bad trade. And the metaphor you and I kind of bounced back and forth this week, Brian, was it would be like if I traded a $10 bill for a $5 bill and then found a steal at a garage sale for $5 and said, see, that $10 trade was right because it was part of the chain that got me that amazing garage sale deal. And that's the wrong way to look at it. And that's one thing that frustrates us in the NBA is draft picks and player contracts are essentially currency, right? You can spend outright or you can acquire assets. That's what we're debating if Golden State has done, right? Is Deangelo Russell is really an asset. So it gets very frustrating when people say that trade for that draft pick mattered because that draft pick was later involved in X. And you're like, that's just like swapping gift cards, and how good the deal was doesn't really have anything to do with the currency that was in your wallet at the time you made that deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just a little bit more on the process here. So we've been complaining a lot about the Warriors process in recent years, basically that all the decisions they've made that have led to their success have been kind of easy decisions that any team would have made, sign Kevin Durant and Steph Curry to super max deals or max deals, whatever. That's good choice, and that won them some titles, right? But then dalliances with Harrison Barnes, Klay Thompson, like we've been talking about, these are all warning signs that maybe this, the infamous Lightyears interview that has come out recently, Joe Lacob said, I couldn't believe the NBA community destroyed me when I made those comments. The VC community loved me for making those comments. So anyway, I wish, did Chris say something like that maybe on the show last week? Anyway, that was kind of funny. But so there's reporting coming out now that Durant and Irving knew they were going to, play for a New York team going back a full year from now, right? And on top of that, the Warriors have kind of been driving Durant away this whole time, even though they've been saying they want to keep him. There's a story that Steph Curry did not want to have a close friendship with Durant, even though Durant wanted one. All these other kinds of comments, right? So they've had a year to come up with this plan for the post-Durant world. And the reporting today is that this Deangelo Russell deal was kind of a lark, that they were just planning on letting Durant walk, and they're like, oh, sure, maybe we'll just bring in Russell at the last minute. So this isn't planned at all. This is not Lightyears. This is just the family business approach, fly by the seat of the pants. And so it is bad in both ways, right? Number one, like I was saying before, putting all those eggs into the guard basket in terms of salary is super, super risky. Maybe it'll pay off, maybe it won't. But then on top of it, they're just not good players. The talent evaluation is just not there. Yes, Curry is great. Klay and Russell, maybe not so much. Maybe they'll develop further. Who knows? But they just have shown they're not a big-time front office. They're just kind of a mediocre front office is what all these moves tell me.
Well, yeah, I was debating talking about the death of Lightyears, so thanks for giving me an opportunity to go into that. But, I mean, that is one of the questions.
Life support is my answer.
Well, it's dead. But one of the players that sorry, I have to just check something. But one of the questions that we have had forever in NBA history is that Harrison Barnes thing. That was what we were saying. So after the Warriors win 73 games, this close to a title, the offseason's coming up. Same idea, right? What are they going to do? What are they going to do, right? What are they going to do for next year? And Harrison Barnes, we very much believe, is on the table. And I want to know what would have happened, right? I really wish we could go back in time because, as you noted, if Kevin Durant comes up to you and says, I want to be on your squad and all you have to do is accommodate me. And, what they ended up doing, right, was they traded Andrew Bogut to Dallas to clear cap space and let Harrison Barnes, they renounced their rights to him so that freed up the cap space. And then those two things gave them enough money to sign Kevin Durant outright. So that's what ended up happening there. But we've always wondered, would they have given Harrison Barnes the money? And this offseason kind of answers a question, because we've noticed the same kind of asteroid coming towards them with Klay Thompson.
Yep.
And I do wonder if his injury changed things, although I'm inclined to believe no, which is him getting that injury. Were they in a position where they thought, we cannot conceivably say no to him, because if we do, the optics of letting him go after him injuring himself in the finals is just too much.
But they could have signed and traded him to the Clippers or wherever he wanted to go. They could have accommodated him and given him more money.
That's the other question. Does he still have off team value? And he might have. I don't quite know the rules or the logistics on health and whatever. Just a second. Sorry about that. I just had to text the wife. But anyway, so we don't know if they were able to do that or wanted to, but I think you've noted, right, we knew this is coming. And you and I have had this discussion for 2 years now, right? They cannot re-sign Klay. And so the second they did that, they were in a bad spot. And the other stuff they're doing, I'm just not a fan of. And I'm basically with Deangelo Russell, my take is, unless they have something that was very obviously planned out, this was a poor maneuver. And Willie Cauley-Stein, who they did get, so that's the good news, they got, is kind of the justification of, which is to say there are always players that come at a discount. So just don't do this, sign a bad player that you have to trade, or trade for draft picks that you didn't have to trade. Just give the money to the good players beyond having, enough pieces on the board that allow you to facilitate those trades. And, for the record, with Kevin Durant walking, they could have, this is a trick that teams use, is exemptions. So you trade a player, you get an exemption that you're able to use in a trade, essentially like free cap space that you're able to use. And not enough teams do that. And we gave some credit to this to actually the Colangelos of all people. But the Philadelphia 76ers did a very interesting thing a few years ago, which is they were waiting for a big offseason. They arguably hit because they got Jimmy Butler right, although he walked. But they signed Amir Johnson and J.J. Redick to like $20 million deals each, just to fill up the cap, because in the NBA, you have to fill up the cap space. But the key being short-term deals. When they're done, that cap space is available if Kevin Durant or LeBron James becomes available. And if not, then you go from there, right? You can sign someone else or whatever. And we're wondering why more teams don't do this, because let's give there are so many teams Brian will see, and I've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on the Bucks in a second. But if you look at Chris Middleton, Jamal Murray, Deangelo Russell, Klay Thompson, I think I'm missing at least one. There are like 5 or 6 players that have gotten signed to near max deals that are just like, what the hell? And
the Warriors have 2 of them. Russell. So these are all the worst contracts in the history of the NBA by definition, right? Like anytime you have a big cap spike, or not technically a cap spike, but just the way it worked out this season, there was one. There's going to be some of the worst contracts ever signed. The Warriors had 2 of them. Porzingis might be my worst. But I have one last thing on the Warriors, Dre, if you're ready for that.
Go for it. I'd like to hear it.
So a couple of things. You're saying about trading Deangelo Russell, right? Mark Stein is the one who said or wrote that. He said he doesn't fit on the team. There's no way they're going to keep him, right? More on that in a moment. And that just made me sigh, with relief. But then coming out today are kind of opposite accounts that, again, this came together at the last minute. They're like, oh, maybe we can make this work. And that they might actually try to play all 3 of them together, right? Russell at shooting guard, Klay at small forward, because he is 6'8". But let me talk about the roster a little bit and about this idea of small ball. So we've said this a million times on the show. The Warriors are a fake small ball team. So you have Klay Thompson, shooting guard, is 6'8". Moving him to small forward is maybe okay. He does not rebound or block shots. He plays much smaller than 6'8". But Steph Curry is a good kind of big point guard, even though he's small physically, right? So that's why it worked out. Then you have Kevin Durant, a 7-footer at small forward. He basically plays like a big man because he is one. And then you put that Klay Thompson production in instead of him. No big man production at all. That's not going to work. Draymond Green is still kind of a small power forward, but adequate. And then at center, you're going to go with who? Looney, who again he's a forward. He's like 6'8". He's even going to start shooting 3-pointers. So they're going to go from a fake small ball team, if they roll that lineup out, to one of the smallest teams in the league. And it's just not going to work. I don't know how they're going to play defense or rebound if they go at that 5. That being said, these are all rumors now. They will bring more players in. They even have 6 days to rework this trade and to direct Russell elsewhere as part of the sign and trade with Durant. So they could still do that. Otherwise, they have to wait till December 15th.
I would say if they don't trade Deangelo by then, as you noted, it's just kind of downhill for you. And I don't really know where to go from.
They're going to be the Lakers, Dre. They're going to be paying Kobe Bryant, the injured Kobe Bryant, just as a prestige guy and lose 1 million games. That's what it looks like they're doing right now with Klay.
Yeah. I mean, I can't.
The only silver lining is they're moving into this new stadium next season, and it's not publicly financed. At least the city of San Francisco isn't on the hook. That's the only positive I can think of.
That is one thing we've mentioned a lot about in basketball, is that it is a lot more like a yacht club. That's the metaphor I use all the time. And that you have these kind of rich people that worry about appearances more so than running a business. And in fact, if you're running an NBA team as a business, the best model is hold it, find the city that'll give you the best stadium deal. It's a freaking socialism for billionaires. It's easy to be upset and angry about that because you've got a party in the United States currently that's basically like, give poor people money. What kind of craziness is this? But if they're like, well, a billionaire clearly needs a multi-million-dollar, possibly $1 billion stadium, help them out for that. That's a good way to spend taxpayer money. I say that as someone in Milwaukee, and that is what happened. Our former Republican, fiscally conservative, destroyed all the unions governor, Scott Walker, gave $250 million either finance or loan to a billionaire for the Bucs stadium, and the Bucs have no business being here. I'm trying to debate if I want to go on to that next. We'll see. But yeah, so the best way to run a business as an NBA team is to just inflate the value of your team as much as possible and then sell it during a boom period. Don't be like, ironically, the Warriors, who sold during a bust period. And it's frustrating when we talk about business, right? It is so easy. This is the one bit of Lightyears credit we give the Warriors. There was this big change in the CBA coming. And I know this because we're fans of Arturo Galletti, American Numbers, on Twitter. And he was saying forever, they're going to get a new TV deal. That new TV deal is going to spike the salary cap.
They're not going to smooth it either.
Well, he didn't know about smoothing, but he did know that spike was coming. So the key would be, even without smoothing, and to a degree the Warriors did this irrespective of that. The Warriors said, we want to have money on the books for when that time comes, which they did, and every team in the NBA should have. But the same idea, right? If you've got an NBA team and you're debating selling it, it is not hard to go, okay, where are we on negotiations for the next TV deal? If I think the next TV deal is going to be better, wait till after it and sell, which, for instance, the New Orleans Pelicans and the Golden State Warriors, the previous owner, did not do. Whereas like Lexi Alexander, the former owner of the Rockets, it's like, yeah, wait till the new TV deal, sell the Rockets for a bundle, keep the trophies in the trophy case, and say, screw you, if you want these, you have to pay extra. Which the new owner, in an almost metaphorical sense, did not. Right, the new owner of the Rockets let the old owner take the titles, and then of course has been very stringent with money, which has arguably kept the Rockets from winning a title. But yeah, that's really all I have to say there is, running as a business, owners don't really seem to do. And that's why we see prestige signings like Klay or like Kobe Bryant, because it's like, we don't want to lose face. Whereas if you were running this as a business, you'd say, we'll lose face. Okay, speaking of which, that is a semi-decent transition to the other team I want to give a lot of talking time to, Brian. There are two, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Denver Nuggets. And then we'll try and just boom, boom, boom through the rest, see as time permits. So the Golden State Warriors, oof. And bad news for me, Brian, not as bad, because unlike your team, my team still kept their MVP and has not signed a horrible, horrible player to $30 million, let alone two of them. But the Milwaukee Bucks, here's a few trades they did. So Tony Snell they let out the door, and I believe that was just a salary.
Do you want me to go through everything they did?
Oh yes, thank you. That would be very.
Yeah, I can go through everything for each team at the top. So they lost Tim Frazier and Nikola Mirotic in free agency. Pau Gasol is coming back next year, he's announced, but he'll be a free agent too. Who knows where he's going? They did a sign and trade with Malcolm Brogdon, sent him to Indiana, and they also traded Tony Snell to Detroit, as you said.
John Lure, who was a bad player too.
Yeah, they got John Lure back from Detroit. They also brought in Robin Lopez from Chicago and re-signed Brook Lopez to a pretty big deal. So they have both Lopez brothers now.
Help me out. What is Brook Lopez's deal? Are you going to make me cry?
Off the top of my head, I want to say 4 years, $52 million is what I saw. So not terrible, but definitely an overpay.
That is okay. That is ludicrously bad. Sorry to cut you off, Brian, even though you're feeding the news. But first off, Brook Lopez, we thought last year was seemingly an outlier. We thought he was a horrible player and he was only a bad player. He was below average for them, and he wasn't the biggest stinker in the playoffs. The reason they unexpectedly lost to Toronto Raptors was really Bledsoe and Giannis. And I mean, that's not surprising. If your two stars don't show up for the most important match, that's huge. But no, this is terrible because Brook Lopez is going to be 34 in the last year of that deal. If we've looked at his numbers before, he's been declining. An important perspective.
I'll guess that Robin Lopez's twin will also be 34 that year as well. Sorry, Dre, keep going. I had to derail that.
All right. And another, by the way, funny note, at one point in my time of database indexing and stuff for NBA stats, if you go to like a Basketball Reference, you'll notice they have like first initial, last name 01, and they'll do like 02, 03 if there's a repeat. So if you look up like Brook Lopez's stats at Basketball Reference, that's how they do it. I made a database once and I decided to use a unique index for each player. And what I used was very similar. First initial, last name, birth date. I thought that was very clever. I thought, okay, this is a very obvious key to use for all the players. The Lopez brothers ruined it. I was like, everything looked weird. I was like, what's going on? It was Brook Lopez and Robin Lopez. Oh, it was last name and birth date or something was what I did. So that messed them up. But no, they're both older. They're both declining. Actually, I'm curious. So what's Robin? Let's see if we can find Robin Lopez's deal as well. Because Brook Lopez, as an example, just as an obvious example, we might call this show the Willie Cauley-Stein show because Willie Cauley-Stein was afforded for less than the mid-level exception is what I'm hearing. Do you know if that's true?
Yeah, Willie Cauley-Stein, I think, was the minimum or something above the minimum, yeah.
Okay, so Willie Cauley-Stein, yeah, he went for nothing. They're saying he got signed for $1.8 million.
Yep.
And he looked decent last year and as a young player. So the fact that Willie Cauley-Stein was available for that, the idea of giving Brook Lopez 4 years at that amount of money is ludicrous. And then Robin Lopez, it looks like, is 2 years, $9 million. That is just utterly frustrating for the Milwaukee Bucks to do. So the Milwaukee Bucks have let Tony Snell and Malcolm Brogdon out the door. And can you refresh my memory? I'm going to go to Boxscore Geeks as well, Brian. What was that worth last season?
Oh, how many wins was that? Oh, it was a lot of wins.
Malcolm Brogdon was really good. And in fact, we could even make the argument that part of their playoff decline was that Malcolm Brogdon, we don't know if he was 100% because he was. Here's how it runs down. Giannis was worth 19 wins. Eric Bledsoe was worth 13 wins. Malcolm Brogdon, if you think he's their third star, 9 wins. Yep. Now we've got Chris Middleton, who was a above average player worth 8 wins. Pat Connaughton was worth 7 wins. Brook Lopez, 4 wins. Tony Snell, 4 wins. So basically, Brogdon plus Tony Snell is approximately 13 wins out the door. And the problem, I would argue, is I don't think they've replaced that, right? Robin Lopez isn't going to replace that. I would think it's very likely to assume that Brook Lopez is going to get worse, whether that's correct or not. I'm also worried. I mean, Giannis was obviously the MVP last season, and I'm not against thinking that he's going to stay that good. But I will just say that it's very possible he regresses, right? Instead of being 4 times as good as an average player, he goes down to 3. So anyway, on the Bucks, all of those moves. And then, of course, as we mentioned, theme of the show, if you gave max money to a player, you messed up. So we've already brought up Deangelo. We've already brought up Klay Thompson. Let's bring up Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton, we actually thought was an above average player last season, quite good. And in his career, we thought he was quite a good player. He was actually kind of one of the enigmas of, say, the Jason Kidd Milwaukee Bucks, because he was very good young, had a bad season that season. Jason Kidd got fired. But yeah, since his third year in the NBA, Chris Middleton has been an above average player. He's a pretty good player, not worth the max money. So the Milwaukee Bucks have possibly taken a step back, in my opinion. And this is one of my soapboxes to get on, which is the Milwaukee Bucks, as I was already complaining about, taxpayer money, blah, 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 blah. They're in a horrible market. Many, many years ago, Devin Dignam wrote a piece about the worst markets for NBA teams. Another example, by the way, is like Charlotte. Charlotte is a fantastic basketball market from a fan perspective, meaning in Charlotte, people love basketball. There are just not enough people to sustain an NBA team. Wisconsin's the same freaking way. Basically, we have enough people that if everybody was behind a team, one team, we could support it. And here's the problem, Brian. I'm going to throw you a softball that I know you'll get. Is there already a team in Wisconsin that fits that niche?
The Packers?
Yeah, the Packers are a are a publicly owned kind of, right? Like you can own stock.
Buy shares, yeah.
Buy shares that you can't sell, so it's a little tenuous. But, the Packers already have the support of the entire state, and that's it, right? Even if the Bucks were really, really good, there is not enough support for those two. And the Bucks could go out and win back-to-back NBA titles, and they're still not touching the Packers, even if the Packers go 3-13 for the next 2 seasons. Although, by the way, fun note, Brian, if Aaron Rodgers could win a freaking MVP this season, we could have baseball, basketball, and football MVP in the same year. That would be remarkable. Anyway, the Bucks have no business having an NBA team, and if you compare the Bucks to the Lakers, this is why it's bad. The Bucks are already starting to cut corners after a 60-win season. Give me 1 second. I'm actually mute. I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that, even though it was my subject.
Yeah. No, so just to finish up the roster stuff on the Bucks, they also brought in Wes Matthews and a rookie, Rajon Tucker, who's not drafted. So that's pretty much all their transactions, right? You said this pretty much, but I'll just state it more plainly. The mistake they made is picking Middleton over Brogdon, right? So they're doing the same thing as the Warriors are. They're having the same problem, that is, which is they're having trouble identifying which are their most important players for winning. They're saying, oh, it's Middleton, it's Brook Lopez, it's not Brogdon. So that's a mistake they're making.
We can give Dan Gilbert a little bit of credit. With LeBron James, that squad was willing to spend the money to keep their title window open. And they didn't do it optimally. They didn't make the best moves, right? They kind of backed themselves in a corner. As an example, J.R. Smith kept getting contracts because they were so over the cap. You could either do a min player or bird rights. And they were basically like, well, we can get J.R. Smith back. We would argue you could probably find an international player that was better than J.R. Smith, but that's neither here nor there. That's what you want to do. And the Warriors as well, right? I think the Warriors, obviously, if Kevin Durant was able to stick around, would have given him the money. And they were willing to spend the money during that 5-year window where they were making titles. The Bucks are anomalous and frustrating in that they already had a 60-win season. They were the best team in the NBA. And the right move, which the Lakers would have done, which the Clippers would have done, right, which not the Rockets anymore because they're stupid, the Celtics would have done, right, is you would have just given the money to Brogdon, to Snell, to Middleton, right? You would have just given the money to those three. We would be sitting here complaining about how Middleton was getting more money than Brogdon, but they'd both be on the squad. Because it's a small market team, they're cutting corners. And this is something we've been arguing in recent time. The Pelicans is an example right now who just picked up Zion Williamson. And one of our favorites, by the way, Derek Favors. The NBA has no business putting their stars in that market because that market can't sustain them. And we've seen stuff like this in the past. The Phoenix Suns carved up the run-and-gun Suns. They traded Kurt Thomas, a productive player, away for nothing, for no reason, just because the owner wanted to save money because he was in a bad market.
And they gave away 2 draft picks, 2 first-round picks to dump that salary.
2 draft picks in the middle of a title window. That is ridiculous. And the Bucks are in the same boat. So, I would say the Warriors, from your perspective, are frustrating and that they're just making poor decisions. The Bucks, to me, are frustrating because Middleton's obviously a poor decision. But, they're probably in the boat of saying, well, we can't get Middleton on the open market, right? Because we're a small market team. No one wants to play here. Even Giannis, by the way, this is kind of a funny one. Giannis is saying all the right stuff, saying, I love it here in Milwaukee, Milwaukee, I want to stay here, blah, 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 blah. He has not had the choice to walk out the door. So we have not seen what happens there. And I'm already starting to see rumblings, right? He signed his contract like 2 years ago, and like after the ink was dry, people were already going like, where's Giannis going to sign his next contract? So this is not a great market for maintaining players. We were making the same argument for Utah picking up Mike Conley. And actually that was one user comment. I'll try and actually get to those next to guide us to our next couple of teams. So we had some people did ask about some teams. But yeah, for the Milwaukee Bucks, they're cutting corners because they're a small market team, and this is frustrating. And it should make you extra mad that Giannis is on this squad, because Giannis's title window is shrinking, and it's being wasted on a team that, you know, they did well last year. I'll give them that, right? They made some good moves. We applauded those moves, right? Great coaching decision. Budenholzer, a fantastic coach, obviously, right, on two teams now has really done wonders. And then they're squandering basically Budenholzer plus Giannis. We'll see how they do next year.
Yeah, but my last thought on the Bucks is they do remind me of the Warriors after 2015, 2016, right? A good up and coming team that all of a sudden is the best team in the league and has this superstar with an all-time great season, which was Steph Curry back then and Giannis last year, right? And like you suspect will happen to Giannis, Steph Curry did regress and wasn't as good, the year after and in years after that, although he was still very good, right? So if the Warriors had done what the Bucks did after that and just kind of kept the same players and let, their star regress, they probably wouldn't have gone on to do what they did. It's an arms race. So they picked up Durant and they kept improving. The Bucks, it looks like, are not going to make their Durant kind of follow-up move like the Warriors did. And
I mean, we've kind of talked the absurdity of this from when we were talking running an NBA team as a business. The numbers are starting to come out, and the landscape has changed, because one of our favorite books, the book that started it all, is Wages of Wins. Wages of Wins, what he looked at was gate attendance to say, how much does player performance impact gate revenue? And by the way, another shout out I get to give today, Brian. I bring up this video all the time, and I've got to write a post on it at some point. But if you look at crack.com, this is a super, super old video, and it's called like 3 Ways Modern Sports Are Based on WWF. And I actually shouted this out today because Michael Swaim, one of my favorites on this, was in it, and I actually shouted it out, and it turns out I'm going to try and get the name right. The other actor in it is now much more famous, and I found it amusing because I was like, I love this video from Michael Swaim. Does anybody know who his co-star is? And then his co-star turns out to be just much more famous than Michael Swaim, which I thought was amusing. And it's Sam Richardson, who plays on The Detroiter and Veep. I still haven't caught up on Veep, Brian, although I hear it's a great show. I'd imagine you as a political person really like it.
I don't really watch Veep, but I have heard it's really good. And okay, I've heard that it's an accurate portrayal.
But anyway, so the reason I'm bringing this up, though, is Cracked has a video that I bring up all the time, which talks about how modern sports really copied a lot of what the WWF did in the 1980s. I'm saying WWF because it was the WWF in the 1980s. And that was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama. I mean, it's scripted, of course, but that's the point. The WWF, the reason it engaged people is it's saying, yes, the wrestling is interesting, even though it's predetermined. But what you're really interested in is these behind-the-scenes feuds. These two wrestlers hate each other. These two wrestlers, Randy, Macho Man Savage, and Hulk Hogan are best friends, but now they're fighting over Miss Elizabeth, right? The biggest change of all was making a villain out of the owner of the league. And they, in this video, which I brought up, basically mentioned that like David Stern and Roger Goodell kind of ripped that off. They're like, we're the villain and we're all sitting here. And so that's one way. This didn't come up in the video at all, but the reason I was relating is the old school methodology for the WWF, WWE, was house shows. That's taking basically doing a circus thing, because you've mentioned wrestling is born in vaudeville, very much like the circus, very much like vaudeville. You have this traveling act that goes to big stadiums, right? It's come through Green Bay a couple of times. I haven't gotten to see it because it turns out like SmackDown is recorded. So if I wanted to go see a SmackDown show, which is a 3-hour show on television, well, it's like 4 to 5 hours to watch them tape it, and I don't have time for that. But that was the old model, right? You sell tickets to shows. That's how you make their money. WWE has changed in that their revenue now is television, right? They have this $1 billion deal with Fox. That's where their revenue is. And the same thing has changed for NBA teams. Their revenue now comes from television deals, et cetera. And then also, funny enough, playoff tickets. So when you look at a team being successful, you go, being successful in the playoffs, that's where the real gate revenue is from, because the Dave Barry gate revenue model would say you moneyball it. You don't worry about going deep in the playoffs, but you worry about having a winning team because people in the regular season will pay for a winning team. The new model says you look for a good television contract and you go as far as you can in the playoffs because, like I mentioned, Tim Kawakami over The Athletic has mentioned that the Warriors, it was worth like $10 million gross, $3 million net for every finals game the Warriors got in the finals. So if you're a team that has a shot at the finals and you're saying, this was our point about the Rockets last year, we can't afford to pay Trevor Ariza $5 million more than he's worth a year. We just can't afford that. You go 2 extra rounds of the playoffs pays for Trevor Ariza on its own. Not to mention, and by the way, this doesn't even come up in that calculus at all. This does come up in Dave Barry's calculus, which is success in the postseason leads to future fans. So something that can dictate, this is one reason the Lakers, right, despite having 4 or 5 years of horrible play, are still a marquee destination and people still like them. People still pay to watch them. People still want to go there, is that they've got decades of success. So you want a successful postseason team for immediate revenue in the modern model and then future revenue. So when we watch teams like the Bucks scrimp, and the Bucks might cost themselves 1 or 2 rounds in the playoffs, and doing that just isn't worth it. And so that just gets extra frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you ready for the rundown, Dre? You want to go to the Atlantic now?
All right, I'm going to cheat and go to the few of the fan comments, which will let us hit some more.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go last to first. Jay Gunter Brett, just giving a shout out back to our Klay Thompson point, noted that the Klay Thompson for Kevin Love trade was nixed by Jerry West because Jerry West, he also scouted, for instance, Kobe Bryant. Jerry West is of the belief that a star shooting guard is what's key to win in the NBA. Wonder where he got that opinion from. But so that's definitely interesting. But he wanted to talk the Lakers a little, and I'm in the same boat. So Jay Brett is a huge Lakers fan, and he's saying that all of the Lakers, right, are unsigned at this moment, except for Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Kyle Kuzma. And we believe we're in somewhat of a holding pattern as they're waiting to see what happens with Kawhi Leonard.
That decision could drop any time now.
The belief is that, Vegas has me thinking he's just going there, which is huge. And then I think at that point, the reality is if Kawhi comes back, if you get McGee, Rondo, and Lance to just agree to minimum deals to re-sign with the team or exception deals, that's a strong team, right? Because first off, I'm gonna give a little bit of optimism, unfounded fan optimism. If Kyle Kuzma gets a reduced role, because that will certainly be the case, right? If you've got LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kawhi on the team, you're not the first scoring option, you're not the second scoring option, you're not the third scoring option, you're the fourth scoring option. And we've seen Kuzma shoot threes acceptably. So if Kuzma gets that, I think he can go better. Rajon Rondo is a great distributor. That starting five, Rondo, Kuzma, Kawhi, LeBron, AD, that's just an amazing starting five. That can compete in the playoffs. So I think that would be fine, and we're just basically waiting for the Kawhi shoe to drop. And I am inclined to believe he does sign with the Lakers.
So we don't know for sure. Some people are saying it could be Clippers or Raptors still. He's going to meet with all 3 teams today. He's already met with the Clippers and Lakers. Is going to meet with the Raptors at some point. Probably already has now that we're taping the show. So here's the rundown of what the Lakers did. They have a ton of unrestricted free agents. They've already lost Reggie Bullock and Mike Muscala. They still have McGee, Stevenson, and Rondo out there, as you mentioned. Also, Tyson Chandler and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are unrestricted free agents. Unrestricted, Alex Caruso and Jonathan Williams, who knows. They traded Lonzo Ball, Bonga, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, Jerome Jones, and Mo Wagner. All those guys got traded. And then, of course, they brought in Anthony Davis. That's huge. Reddit's showing Iguodala and Jared Dudley right now, so they may have signed those 2 players recently. And that if they do get Iguodala and Jared Dudley, I probably am going to be picking them to win the title in the preseason, but we'll see.
Jared Dudley is fascinating, and that I think even we would agree that at this point he is a bad player. He was a horrible player last season for Brooklyn, but
he's been good recently, though, even though he wasn't last season.
Well, also that's an interesting point because you're pointing out that last season for Brooklyn, he was, at least according to Yahoo Sports, listed as a power forward. That's hurt. And, as when you mentioned recently, in Milwaukee as a small forward, he's a good player. And then Washington, Phoenix, and Brooklyn all decided to play him as a power forward in the stupid small ball meme. if he's a backup shooting guard small forward for the Lakers, that could be something. Andre Iguodala, who freaking knows on that guy, right? Because, he reminds me a lot of Manu Ginobili in that I was like, I love you, Andre Iguodala, but you're not worth that next contract. That was what I said when the Warriors re-signed him. I was like, congratulations on getting that contract, but oh boy, I don't think you're going to be worth it. And I was wrong. Easily worth it. Andre Iguodala, even with them not getting this last year of him on the squad, that was absolutely worth it to the Warriors. He has just been fantastic. So if Andre Iguodala is 50% and comes off the bench, I think I'm a Lakers fan if Andre Iguodala is there, Brian. So where are you seeing that? Is that Reddit?
It's on this Reddit thread that's being updated. I haven't seen any news articles yet, so yeah, that's where we're at right now.
I might
and
actually.
And again, Dre, let's point it out. Even though because all these reporters say it, there's still 4 days until it's official, so things can change. That's just where it is right now.
This depth chart is a little interesting. The Los Angeles Lakers depth chart, I'm going to have to say, a little fascinating. They're having LeBron James at small forward, Kuzma at power forward. We'll see what happens there. But anyway, if Andre Iguodala is on the Lakers, man, I'm a fan, and I that's only good news because we've seen in past Andre Iguodala is pretty savvy, and so he might be reading the writing on the wall about some other players. One rumor I've heard is that one of the reasons there is such radio silence out of Kawhi is he just doesn't want leaks. So it's a funny chicken and the egg thing, which is we're not hearing anything because he doesn't want us to hear anything, and then because we're not hearing anything, everybody's over speculating. So hopefully in the next couple of days we do find something out.
So LakersNation.com reported 3 hours ago Andre Iguodala is planning on joining the Lakers. So
yes,
whatever that means, like planning in quotes.
And I mean, he's one of those situations that means there has to have been a buyout. We've seen this happen before. The most infamous, what's his name? Was it Josh Smith? Josh Smith with the Pistons, where they just renounced him and then he was bought. So it was like with Josh Smith, it's like he was already getting paid by the former team. So any future team that picked him up for the minimum, he was already getting paid. So essentially, if Memphis bought out Andre Iguodala, he's already getting his pay, and that's why he's probably willing to go. I'm very excited, by the way, Brian, if that's true. Or actually, it seems like it's true. I mean, Reddit's reporting it, Twitter's reporting it. I'll agree with it. So we'll just have to wait and see on the Lakers. Hopefully, Chris Ye is recovered enough in the next week or two to talk more, especially if they get more good news in the offseason. I'm going to leave the Lakers alone. We'll push them off because we're as you noted, we're trying to do a bunch of teams, and I've kept us stuck in 3. I do want to give a shout out to just Trick Will 1988, who noted we already discussed the Warriors, so I'm not going to do more. He just said they traded Iguodala for cap room, and so the Warriors have let 17 million wins walk out the door. And I'm sorry, Brian, you have not replaced those, so we'll see what happens. Yep. All right, Rebound and Threes had 2 teams, so let's let these be our next 2 teams. He wanted to ask about Memphis and Utah. Utah, by the way, is a fascinating one, Brian, because this runs into the point the very cold calculating economist at the start. From a purely Moneyball economist standpoint, I'm probably going to argue that Memphis is going to, be overpaying Mike Conley. I do kind of like them this season, although I'm worried about one thing. So let's go to that Reddit post to see, because
which team are we doing now? Because Conley is on Utah now, not Memphis.
Okay, so but that's the key. So Utah basically renounced Ricky Rubio, traded away Kyle Korver and Jay Crowder, and picked up Mike Conley. And I think this is good just from the standpoint that, one, Ricky Rubio, if you look at his numbers last season, has just been declining. We've loved Ricky Rubio in the past, but he's expensive and seems to be...
He's in his 30s now, I think, right?
Yes.
So
Jay Crowder has been god-awful. And we love... Same Kyle Korver, same point. Loved him in the past, but he is past his peak. Mike Conley was an above-average player last season, and Chris Ye on last week's show astutely noted, Utah's not attracting marquee free agents. For as much as they were like, oh, we're going after Deangelo Russell, like I just shook my head. I was like, they're lucky. Deangelo Russell.
Do you want me to run through everything they've done?
So let's run through.
So you mentioned that trade. Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder, Kyle Korver's gone now too. Derek Favors is gone. I think we mentioned that earlier in the show. That's a really big one. They did sign Ed Davis away from Brooklyn. 2 years, $10 million total. That's another steal. Ed Davis just keeps being really valuable. Their big free agency, though, and we were talking about this, that Utah doesn't sign many free agents. This might be their biggest free agent pickup ever. Bojan Bogdanovic from Indiana is coming over. He's going to play power forward alongside Joe Ingles, it looks like. So that's what they're going to run out there. Connolly, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, Bogdanovic, and Rudy Gobert. This to me, it seems like they're going to be about the same as last year. Like, I don't like these moves necessarily. Some of them are good. Stavros Cephalosha is still a UFA. We don't know if he's going to be back yet. So I don't know what I think about this team. I'm not sure.
Well, first off, they did this is a weird thing. So there was this rumor at the time that the Houston Rockets were going to trade Eric Gordon, wrong Eric. Eric Gordon, Clint Capella for Jimmy Butler. And that's a fascinating trade, right? Because you go, well, losing Clint Capella is bad, but losing Eric Gordon is good, and gaining Jimmy Butler is good. So that's probably a net positive, even though it's kind of weird. Whereas I would say Mike Conley is overpaid, but that is a net positive move. They're overpaid for wins, but I'm trying to remember, how many wins did they get last season? They were close to 50, right?
Yeah, and they played a little below their Pythagorean, if I remember, too. So they were a pretty strong team last year. Okay,
so Utah exactly 50 wins. So this team has upgraded themselves, right? And this is with, the Warriors moving back. So that is good. I think
Favors is the big one, though, Dre. I think that's a really big loss.
You're right. Ed Davis is a fine. I mean, they're going to be in the exact same freaking scenario they were with Favors, by the way, which is they've got Ed Davis. Ed Davis is spectacular. If they give minutes to Ed Davis, this team can be great. And then we were in the same boat with Derek Favors, right? That was what screwed him in the playoffs last year. We're like, basically, give more minutes to Derek Favors and you're great. And they didn't want to give minutes to Derek Favors, and that cost them against Houston, right? Because Houston is like, well, if you're not going to play Derek Favors, this was really funny because we talk small ball versus big ball in the NBA. Derek Favors, PJ Tucker, and Marc Gasol. These two players are interesting because we think Marc Gasol and PJ Tucker aren't that good. But Marc Gasol looked freaking productive the last two rounds of the NBA playoffs because he wasn't playing against real centers. And the same thing was true. PJ Tucker against Utah looked great, and it's because they were playing small instead of running out Derek Favors. So, they're in the same boat. I think they've upgraded themselves at point guard. They've got rid of a liability, which is Jay Crowder, and they have Ed Davis as an option. So I think this team has just improved. And, same kind of weird point that we were making about Kyle Kuzma. Donovan Mitchell's in a very similar boat. If Donovan Mitchell just improves, this team is in great shape. So I'm actually a huge fan of all the stuff Utah's done. I think Favors was probably over market value. So switching him into Ed Davis and Bojan is fine.
They did add two potential problem players, though, Moutier and Jeff Green, that I failed to mention. So
Jeff Green is terrible.
If either of those guys get minutes, it could be dicey, but maybe not. Maybe they won't be as big a factor. Are you ready for Memphis?
Let's go to Memphis. Memphis is a fascinating one because I think some good, some bad. I think the biggest issue is just a lot of youngin'. Okay, so they've got. Okay, so the big problem one, Brian, and we'll see if I'm just wrong, is they're likely starting Jay Crowder. That's their one weakness. They picked up John Morant, who we think is a great draft pick. Unfortunately, here's where I always run into. I don't think it is good to give the keys to a rookie. I've said you can kind of try it out a little, a la Luka Doncic, a la Ben Simmons. If they look great, you give them more responsibility, but you shouldn't count on it. They really should have a better point guard. I don't know how Javon Carter is, so I'll have to take a look at that.
He was really good in college, and I think he was good as a young player, too. So I would be fine with having Javon Carter as your point guard. They also had DeLon Wright, who's a free agent. He came over as part of that Valanciunas deal.
That was a great pickup then.
So if DeLon Wright comes back, it's not clear if he will at this point. They could be okay at point guard even without Morant. They picked up all those Utah players we talked about. They re-signed Valanciunas, which is a really big thing, right? Like that, he's a really good player. So building around him and Morant seems like a smart move. They still have Kyle Anderson, who's really good. Chandler Parsons, who's not, and who knows what he's going to do. He's just kind of been hurt. But I want to point out that they took a lot of rookies other than John Morant. They also got Brandon Clark, who was like the second best player in college, basically behind Zion. And they also got John Conchar, who is a small school guy who is really, really good. So they probably had the best draft based on just who was good in college of almost anyone, maybe New Orleans.
Unfortunately, I hate to say, so I can't believe we missed this metaphor when we were talking to the Warriors. You said you called Klay Thompson a landmine the Warriors had been dancing around the last 2 seasons and finally stepped on. The unfortunate reality for the Grizzlies, I think John Morant is a great draft pick. I think Jonas is a great re-signing. Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Kyle Korver, Javon Carter wasn't good last season, Grayson Allen. They have too many bad players on this squad.
They can't make the playoffs unless they get really lucky with all the young players, right? And that's what all these tanking teams are kind of hoping for. But, who knows? They should have kept Andre Iguodala. That's my thing.
Well, we brought this up with Utah, where like Jeff Green, right? This is a point we brought up. Andrew Sutton on the show has brought this up before, and we like using it as the no bad players on the squad. And the reason we fall for that is that we say anytime there's a bad player on your team, there's the risk that they are going to get played. And with Utah as an example, I think they have a great set of lineups that they can play. I was bringing up Ed Davis, but they also have Jeff Green on the squad. So if that team decides to play Jeff Green to play small in front of Ed Davis or Bojan, they're going to be hurting. Now, the problem with the Memphis Grizzlies is they have too many Javon Carter, Avery Bradley, Kyle Korver, Grayson Allen, Jay Crowder, too many bad players for me to believe that they're going to avoid playing all of them. So that's really just where they're at. So I think they did some good stuff. I think there's positive. I think a good front office would flip that stuff and other things. I don't have much faith for them this season.
That's fair. Good moves, but they're not that good yet.
All right, Brian, last team I actually really want to just make sure we get on the show, then we can just do whatever else as fast as we can. Denver Nuggets, 2 interesting points. So the 2 things that they have done that are interesting, one is they just basically kept Paul Millsap for that $30 million. So Paul Millsap had a 3-year contract, 2 years guaranteed. So this 3rd year wasn't guaranteed. They just gave him the full $30 million. Now, on the one hand, that's way overpaid. He was a good player last year, still wasn't worth $30 million last year. He's getting older. I don't think he'll be worth it this year. But as I can't remember if it was pre-show or if it made the show, we were bringing up the Philadelphia 76ers many years ago, where they gave J.J. Redick and Amir Johnson basically $20 million each. And they said, here's what we're going to do. We're basically going to block that cap space. The NBA forces us to spend 80% of the cap. So we're just going to spend the money. We're going to get ourselves above the cap. And then at the end of the season, that money's free. And if it's not free, we can re-sign you. That was their thinking, which is we've kind of, you and I have been bickering back and forth as to if that was the best spending of that, if Amir Johnson and J.J. Redick were the best 2 players they could get. But the move itself was sound. Paul Millsap's kind of still similar. If the Nuggets didn't think they were going to do better than Paul Millsap, and there might be, right, Willie Cauley-Stein went for nothing, but regardless, just giving him 1 year and then saying we're going to punt to next year is absolutely fine. The one mistake they have made, kind of, and Chris Ye called this, was they gave Jamal Murray a max. And so the reason we kind of don't like this is that, one, Jamal Murray is at the weakest position. He's a guard, arguably a shooting guard. And we've said it's interesting. We've said he's like a decent player and might, this is the funny point. You've been saying, well, Deangelo Russell might get better. We hate that line of thinking in the NBA. Yeah. We hate the line of thinking. He's
exactly like Russell, isn't he, Dre? He's been good at times, but
super high ceiling. But I mean, yeah, actually very similar to Russell. Both of them have true shootings in the 54% last season. He might improve, but we're never a fan of saying, give the player all this money and then hope they improve. We like paying for stuff that's there. Or if you've got a player like Jamal Murray, you take advantage while they're cheap. And then if you can't, you trade him for other stuff. So that's what we wish they would have done. So that's a rough one. But the interesting part about the Nuggets is they have a fairly good core. So this is the interesting part. There are like 2 scenarios we're mentioning. There's inefficient spending and bad spending. Memphis, as an example, barring a bunch of moves, they have spent too much of their cap and roster spaces poorly for us to have any faith in them. There's the mixed bag, right? There's Utah, where we go, you have some good players that are signed to very advantageous contracts. That's Rudy Gobert as an example. You have some players that are probably overpaid. That's Donovan Mitchell. And you have some, players that you shouldn't play. And if you don't play them, you're fine. That's Jeff Green. Mixed bag. Denver, I would say, is an inefficient team. They have, between Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Nikola Jokic, Paul Millsap, they do need to just move on from Trey Lyles, unfortunately. And then the Monty Morris, that is a really good squad. So we're digging them for spending their money inefficiently. But the good news is if you have a good team, this team, don't forget, last season won 54 wins. That's great. And then the reason I'm really psyched is they have Michael Porter Jr. on squad, who was the number 2 ranked recruit rank going into college, got injured immediately. And we're going to get hyped over Summer League, Brian, because he's going to be playing in Summer League this season.
I'm all about Summer League, Dre. I'm going to be watching it right after we tape this show.
Michael Porter Jr. is allegedly looking great. That's one. And then they picked up one of the best picks in the draft, Bowl. And so what I'm a fan of with the Nuggets is going, well, they're not spending their money efficiently, but they've got some really good players already. They already had a 50-win squad, and they're bringing most of it back. And they've got some good prospects that might improve. So I can ding them and go, you're not spending your money efficiently. But the funny news is I can go, I'm more optimistic about you than the Warriors, certainly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as long as you have someone like Jokic or, like you said, the Jazz and Gobert, that's really what you need there. You need that MVP caliber player. Yeah. that MVP Cavalier player. But no, if you
MVP Cavalier player,
yeah.
that the LeBron James, is that the
Exactly. No, but if you have that guy, you're a title contender, right? And they've haven't spent all the best money. Murray is kind of like Deangelo Russell, but yeah, I mean, I'm looking for them to compete for the Western Conference title.
Well, I mean, it is amusing that I get to be on both sides of the coin between Milwaukee and Denver, both small market teams, no business having an NBA team. Going to Denver, you've probably overspent on players that you could probably more optimally find, but you're overspending on a 50-win squad. Whereas the Bucks, I'm going, you have a 60-win squad. What the hell are you doing letting, Malcolm Brogdon walk over? It has to just be a couple million, right? Why on earth would you do that? So it's a funny dichotomy to say, this is two different ways to make a mistake. But then, as I already said about the Denver Nuggets, the value of an NBA team isn't the year-to-year operating costs. It's that franchise just going to go up and up. So if the Nuggets overpay by $10 to $20 million this season to get a title, that's going to be worth it in the long run. Whereas the Bucks are shooting their long-term earning potential in terms of value of the franchise. All right, Brian, we can just go in order if you want. We hit
Boston Celtics.
All right, Boston Celtics. Interesting. So the Boston Celtics are interesting. Why don't we do this as a habit? Because I'm already, as you've already realized on the show, Brian, I'll be like 2 moves behind. I forgot Jeff Green on Utah as an example.
Okay. Do you want me to start each team off?
You run down. We give our 2 cents. We decide how much we want to go, and we'll go as fast as we can to get through the remaining teams.
Yeah, Boston Celtics lost very, very core players. Al Horford went to Philadelphia. Kyrie Irving went to Brooklyn, of course. They also signed and traded Terry Rozier to Charlotte and traded Aaron Baines to Phoenix. They drafted 4 rookies, including Grant Williams, who has very good numbers, so he's someone interesting to look for. They also got Taco Fall, who as a rookie is a free agent, and he was one of the top rookies as well college players as well that was not drafted. Now to replace those guys, they brought in Kemba Walker, who we like but probably wouldn't want to max out. So I think he's a significant downgrade to Irving. His true shooting is about 6 points lower, I believe, so that's a big loss. And they did bring in Enes Kanter as a center to replace those outgoing centers who we like. I don't know what the money was for Kanter, but it was probably advantageous, so that was a good deal. But to me, it looks like they're really depending on Gordon Hayward to get healthy again and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to kind of go back to their rookie levels for them to get better. To me, they're kind of the same as last year, or maybe even worse, which is bad when everyone else is getting better. So I'm not sure if the Celtics can stay in that first tier of the East when the East is so loaded. They may be falling down to a second-tier East team, but I could be wrong. They're an interesting team.
First off, I'm just going to say you're right because you're wrong. So
okay. I want to hear this.
So as a reminder, Patrick and I don't know if he has time or will do it this season. We've gone out to Vegas and passed, or he's gone out to Vegas and put down bets. And we always bet the under on the Celtics, and the Celtics always screw us and get the over. And so this season, I'm actually going to say I disagree with your take, and I think the Celtics are in a great spot. Now, here's a funny note. You notice that Kemba Walker is a downgrade from Kyrie Irving. Mm-hmm. On last year's numbers, that's true. But if you looked at Kyrie Irving coming out of Cleveland going to Boston, he was about Kemba Walker's level. And one thing that we believe is that Brad Stevens is a good coach. And so if Kemba Walker has a boost under Brad Stevens, he could be a very good player. Additionally, we love Enes Kanter, so here's hoping he gets play, fingers crossed. And Al Horford, all love to him, but when we get to the 76ers, which will be soon, I love the guy. He's not worth that contract, right? This is the classic Chris Paul note where he's an older player that he just got a 4-year deal, I believe.
Yeah.
He's not going to be worth it on that 4th year. So in reality, I think that Kemba Walker plus Enes Kanter replaces just fine Kyrie Irving plus Al Horford. I think that is fine. I'm seeing people talk about Enes Kanter's defense, and as we always note, team defense seems to trump individual defense, meaning the team scheme, if you have enough players on the team that play defense well. A reminder, Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie Irving were both known as poor defenders and played on top 10 defenses when they were with the Celtics. There might, it's possible that Enes Kanter is a liability in some senses, but if the rest of the team's able to make up for it, they're fine. So I really like this squad, the position they're in. I wish they could have kept Aaron Baines. I don't mind them losing Terry Rozier. It is a little amusing that it's for Kemba Walker. We've seen bigger names in the past linked to him. But no, I think the Boston Celtics, I think you're kind of right that they might not be the top tier. But the reason they might not be the top tier is just, for instance, Brooklyn might be coming out of nowhere. If Philadelphia is an interesting one, even losing Jimmy Butler, if there's health to Embiid, if there's natural progression to Ben Simmons, they're in a good spot. So, it's worth remembering. Well, we're going to Toronto's just a fascinating one, right? Because until we know what happens with Kawhi and Danny Green, we don't know about that squad.
Yeah.
So you might be right, but I think it just might be, to your point, they don't improve as much as other teams, but they might not have had the ability to.
No, I agree with that. I don't blame them, and I don't think they should have brought back Horford. But the fact remains that Horford did have a career year for them last season, and it's hard to replace that. So they shouldn't expect him to be as good this year, but where are they going to get that production from? Right? Cantor is good, but was he that good? Yeah, we'll see.
Yes, he was that.
So next team, are you ready? Brooklyn Nets, Dre?
Nets, let's run it down.
This is a really exciting one, of course. So they lost DeMar Carroll, Ed Davis, and Jared Dudley. They signed and traded Deangelo Russell, of course, and they traded Alan Crabb, Traven Graham, and Shabazz Napier. All those guys are gone, but they brought in Kyrie Irving. They brought in Garrett Temple, Kevin Durant, of course, Taurean Prince, and DeAndre Jordan. Kevin Durant's going to miss most of this season with his Achilles, but maybe he'll be around for the playoffs. But next year, damn, they'll be good. They still have Jared Allen and Joe Harris, who are really, really good players. Harris won the three-point contest last year. He was one of the best three-point shooters. Jared Allen is a great center. I don't know if they're going to play Twin Towers with DeAndre Jordan or what, but this team got way, way better. I don't know if they're good enough to compete.
Jared Allen? They didn't lose him?
Jared Allen's still on the team as far as I know. The Warriors should have signed a trade for him instead of D'Angelo Russell, but they didn't.
Because that was what I was hearing, is that Jared Allen, when I heard DeAndre Jordan, I was like, oh, that's good news, but they lost Jared Allen. But if they have both, that's actually fantastic news and a weird kind of point for long-termness of the team. With DeAndre Jordan getting older, Jared Allen's able to take over. It's always a hard thing, right? The NBA is a rough one between starters, six-man backup, where you can transition and you eventually end up kind of with people clashing. But no, Kyrie, Durant, basically Durant plus DeAndre were our two big names. And so that's the funny thing, where what I've said is most teams that have spent the money, including my Nuggets, including the Bucks, including your Warriors, they've messed up. The one team that didn't mess up, though, is the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Jordan are three players we thought were completely worth going for. This team looks spectacular. As you noted, we're going to have to see about Kevin Durant's health. What I said, this smacked of a lot to me was of the Orlando Magic back in the day, where, they got, what was it?
Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, almost Tim Duncan.
Almost Tim. They were hoping for that big three. Last second, Tim Duncan backs out. Tracy McGrady or Grant Hill is just never healthy. And, Tracy McGrady plays great, but then has squabbles and goes to the Rockets. So this smacks a lot of that to me, because we don't know what's going to happen between health and all that. But, this team, when healthy, has to be the favorites out East.
Yeah, it's very possible. Well, first of all, let's see what happens with Kawhi and the rest of the moves. But yeah, as of today, that seems like the right call, right? I'm always suspicious when rosters turn over this much. Like, what is the team going to look like? But yeah, here's one thing about it, Dre, that for people that don't listen to this show regularly, we consider DeAndre Jordan to be of the caliber of Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant, and that's someone who could be a top 10 player very easily any year he plays in the NBA and has been most years. So he's an incredibly good player. And for all three of those players to go somewhere.
What's funny, I use this term all the time, the Brian Bins of productivity. And this lines up a lot with Dean Oliver's 4 factors, though you're a little smarter about it, where you're saying, very baseball, very moneyballish. Let's look at scoring. Let's look at defense. Let's look at rebounding. When you are, we actually agree with this point. I kind of bristle at the term chemistry because most people tend to use that as, these players get along, so it's chemistry. Whereas I'd more view it as, well, you're going to need this many assists and this many rebounds, etc. And the funny thing is, if you probably look at Kyrie Irving plus DeAndre Jordan, that's a Super Saiyan fusion thing. If you remember in whatever season, that was one of the things they do. They'd put their fingers together. I'm making a symbol on the video show, but they'd put their fingers together and they'd fuse into one super being. Kyrie Irving plus DeAndre Jordan probably merged together to what we would consider 2 perfect superstar players. And you add Durant in the middle. And
contrast
that's just
Brooklyn, Dre, to the Warriors, who I complained about putting just all their money into 3 guards, right? Brooklyn Nets have done it perfectly. Like if we were to look at any 3 players in the league and say, who do we want to have be super maxes to start a team? Maybe it'd be slightly different than this, but not much different, right? Kyrie Irving, one of the best shooters in the league, also really good point guard. Kevin Durant does everything big man stuff and also one of the best scorers in the league. And then DeAndre Jordan, one of the best big men, does all the big man stuff. Like you said, it's a perfect fusion of stats for these 3 players. When you already have Joe Harris and Jared Allen, love this team. Dinwiddie as well, nice backup guard. LeVert too. I like this team.
Some really good. Yeah, and that's another good, with your point about Kevin Durant being out, they have some depth, which is really fantastic. Okay, I'm going to put us in haiku mode. So we're just going to go through. I think we've talked the major teams that we needed to talk. And let's just try and go through the rest really fast. So I'll follow you, Knicks. And I'll just say, limit us unless there's something really, really key to talk about.
Yeah, they lost DeAndre Jordan and Noah Vonleh. They signed Julius Randle, Bobby Portis, Wayne Ellington, Elfrid Payton, Reggie Bullock, and Todd Gibson. They have Mitchell Robinson coming back. I mean, so I don't hate all these free agents necessarily, Dre, but there's just not much talent on this team. They're going to be one of the worst teams again.
Elfrid Payton, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson are pretty good, but some of these other.
But there's nothing there already, right? There's only Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, this team isn't good. This is a major letdown from what they thought. But let's give just a point to both the Warriors and the Knicks. When you have front offices that have issues, the Warriors didn't. Their tenure with Kevin Durant did not end well, and the Knicks, don't forget, James Dolan got into all sorts of stuff. I am not like these stupid old curmudgeonly people that are like, the sport's getting ruined, things are getting worse, etc. I am a fan of players saying, F you, I don't want to play for this crazy owner. It was rumored that Kyrie Irving and Durant wanted to go to the Knicks, and they went to the Nets, and I think that's a good thing. They're like, we want to play in a good big market together. We want to make a name for ourselves. That's fine. And I think it is much better that they went to the Nets than the Knicks because, screw asshole owners. All right, 76ers.
Yeah, this is another super interesting one. So they started out by paying a max to Al Horford. We've already talked about him. Maybe that's not a full max, but they also paid Tobias Harris, right? Where Embiid is already making max as a center. So they pay 2 power forward style centers almost, Horford and Harris, to go with Embiid. And then on top of that, today they followed up with maxing Ben Simmons as well. So I'm not sure. And they signed and traded Jimmy Butler. Of course, he's gone. JJ Redick is gone as well. It looks like probably TJ McConnell and Greg Monroe are also going to leave. So I don't know what's going on with this team. It's going to be really interesting. They did draft Tybal, who is one of the best rookies, and Kyle O'Quinn is a super good, another really big player they brought in. This is a big team, Dre.
I like that. Josh Richardson is the one they picked up. Here's what's fascinating. Here's what I'll give you. Tobias Harris is a player. Last season, we thought he looked below average, but he looks below average as a power forward. Bringing in Al Horford's probably going to play the 4. Tobias Harris is going to play the 3. As you mentioned, it's with Embiid. This is a pretty big team. So what's interesting is if we look at Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Al Horford last season. Josh Richardson we have listed as a 3. Tobias Harris as a 4. Al Horford as a 5. All of them are going to shift down 1, and I think that's just good. Now, I do think it is likely, even if Tobias Harris looks better as a small forward, he's probably overpaid. We think this is going to hurt us. Joel Embiid is overpaid just because he can't stay healthy, and Al Horford's probably overpaid because of age. This is an interesting squad, but I'm actually optimistic for next year. I think the wheels can fall off this squad, but it's funny. If we're making this kind of not really authoritarian versus liberal liberal chart, but if we're making the spend too much but have a chance versus cut corners and hurt your chances in the playoffs, I'm putting them in the same boat like them and the Denver Nuggets, right? They're overpaying for players, right? I think it's going to be obvious. Jimmy Butler didn't want to come back. I think that's it's very clear. I mean, it's very much like Andre Iguodala, where he clearly didn't want to play for them, which is fine. But, they did all right. They didn't do optimally. They overspent. But I think this team is definitely a playoff team. And as we've seen, if Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons go off in the playoffs, this team can get to the finals. So I think that's absolutely fine. Just as a last note on Jimmy Butler, when I'm seeing people say all these players like Jimmy Butler saying they just want to go to a contender, I bring up the sports compared to wrestling, where I say sports fans are marks. I hate to ruin Christmas for you people. When professional athletes give interviews, it's basically like a wrestling promotion. A wrestling promotion is when Hulk Hogan gets up and says, "This Sunday I'm going to destroy Macho Man," rawr, right? It's not real. So Kevin Durant doesn't have to tell the truth in a press conference. Jimmy Butler doesn't have to tell the truth in a press conference. And many of these players who have brands know that they have to say the right thing, because if he comes out and says, "I just want the money, screw you," his endorsers are going to go, "That's great, but it's going to be really hard to sell a Jimmy Butler shoe if you just tell Miami you don't like them." So say you're here to play for a win or whatever. For what it's worth, Miami looks great, but I think we're getting to them soon. Okay, the Raptors, I'll let you read off. I don't think I've done much. And that's what I'm going to say.
To finish up briefly on the 76ers, I agree with everything you said. I like that they're trying to go for the title, and these are not bad moves. It's just so risky because Ben Simmons is their only guard now. If he gets hurt, they have Shake Milton and Zaire Smith. So it's just risky, but I like it. Okay, so Raptors, I'll let you say what you're going to say, but this is all about Kawhi. Nothing else matters, right?
Have to wait on the Raptors.
Yeah, we have to wait. Bulls. So Bulls have done some interesting things. They lost Robin Lopez, whatever. But they brought in Thaddeus Young and Satoransky as well from Washington. I don't know what Young's contract is, but Satoransky was pretty decent, I think. And they did trade for Otto Porter. Let's remind ourselves of that. So those are some interesting players for sure. They've got money in Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine, though, so I'm not confident in them. They're not going to be a good team next year, but interesting moves is all I have to say.
Yeah, I'll agree with interesting moves. I don't want to do more because, I'm trying to look at the time and stuff.
Cleveland Cavaliers, Channing Frye retired, and otherwise they just brought in a ton of rookies. I don't think they're going to make any kind of a jump next year. Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson are pretty good, big men when healthy, but they haven't been healthy together in a while.
All right, Detroit Pistons.
They haven't done very much, really. They got Tony Snell, like we mentioned. Derrick Rose and Tim Frazier. There's rumblings that they're worried about the luxury tax, so they might try to keep Blake Griffin and trade Andre Drummond, but not much has happened here yet. I say let's wait and see on them.
Snell is an upgrade from Lure. They were a bubble playoff team last season. I think they're in the same boat. All right, yeah. Indiana. I've been loving Indiana the last couple of seasons. So let's run this down.
Yeah, I agree. So Brogdon they brought in. We love him, right? We thought that was great. They didn't even pay him the max either, I don't think. I think they did 4 years, $90 million, which is less than the max. So that's pretty good. TJ Warren they got from Phoenix, and they still have Sabonis, who we like. The big one is Jeremy Lamb. When they already have Oladipo, it's kind of interesting. Here's the question I don't know, Dre. Did Jeremy Lamb get paid a lot of money or not?
I do not know that.
I don't know. But they lost Thaddeus Young, Tyreek Evans, Darren Collison, Corey Joseph, Bojan Bogdanovic, Kyle O'Quinn. Those are all really, really good players. Wow. So this team has a lot of upheaval, and I just don't really know what to say. I like Brogdon, but losing some of those guys is scary.
Well, so first off, Jeremy Lamb, very good. Malcolm Brogdon, very good.
It's true.
TJ Warren's interesting because he wasn't good last season, but was injured, so we'll just have to see.
They'll just play Oladipo at small forward, right? Brogdon, Lamb, Oladipo are like their three wings. That's not bad.
And TJ Leaf played well last season. So, I mean, the key point on this team is they're a good team. They kept Sabonis. Hopefully Sabonis gets more play, or at least upgraded to a Manu Ginobili-like role. They're in good shape. This is I mean, basically if you look at their top 7, which is Brogdon, Oladipo, Warren, Leaf, Turner, and I would say Lamb and Sabonis, that is a really solid
Yeah,
play.
they could be in that second, maybe even first tier of East Coast teams.
All right, Milwaukee Bucks, we already discussed, of course. Let's go to the Hawks.
Not much to say on the Hawks. They have a ton of rookies. They made that weird Evan Turner trade we talked about. They got Solomon Hill and Alan Crabb. They lost Dwayne Dedmon, who's a good player, and Deontay Davis. So I don't know. They made that terrible trade draft day, if you remember, Dre. They gave away a bunch of first-round picks. And then they took Cam Reddish, who was one of the worst college players. Although they took Bruno Fernando later on, who was really good. So, I mean, this is just a team full of young players that I don't think is going to compete. Not much to say there. I like John Collins, though.
By the way, because they're putting Evan Turner third on the depth chart. That is the one good thing they did. Don't forget they traded Kent Bazemore for Evan Turner, which we were baffled on Portland. And if we get to Portland this show, I do think we think Portland looks in fine shape regardless. So that was one good thing. But yeah, this was the key is this was a bad team last year. They haven't done enough outside of Evan Turner for us to believe they're a good team this year. Next.
They're just hoping Trae Young becomes a star, and who knows? He's young.
Yep.
Charlotte Hornets have done some stuff. The aforementioned Jeremy Lamb left, and of course Kemba Walker. Tony Parker retired, and Frank Kaminsky went to Phoenix. Who have they brought in, though? A bunch of rookies, and Terry Rozier, they made that trade. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to see much going on here. Batum and Kid Gilchrist are players we've really liked, but have been basically just hurt for the last few years. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to see this team making a big step
Here's
up.
the tough part. Kemba Walker plus Jeremy Lamb might be about equal to Rozier, if this makes any sense, minus Kaminsky. Because Kaminsky has been god-awful.
Yeah.
I wanted to like him. He went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a highly touted draft pick.
Really good player in college.
Really good college player. Allegedly, Michael Jordan turned down a bunch of Boston Celtics offers because he really, really wanted Kaminsky. But he's been hurting that squad. But I think your point's kind of sound. They're spinning their wheels, and Marvin Williams isn't getting any younger. And I doubt Bismack Biyombo gets play, so we'll have to see. All right, Miami Heat's a fun one. I can't believe we dropped them this much, but they're interesting.
Yeah, so Dwayne Wade retired, of course, pouring out for him. So kind of an underrated move that's bad for the Heat, I think, is they got rid of Hassan Whiteside, who we really like. It seems like he had worn out his welcome there, though, so he had to go anyway. They got Myers Leonard in return, who's a player I haven't liked at all, but he kind of came out of nowhere and had an interesting season last year, so maybe he'll get somewhere. I don't know. But the big one, of course, is Jimmy Butler, sign and trade. That's a big move for the Heat. They went from having not a lot at all except for Whiteside, who had been hurt, to now having a legit star in Butler. So it seems like they're not going to keep Goran Dragic, though, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, Butler's a big move, but I don't know if there's enough there already for them to be a serious team, Dre.
Well, I mean, I think the good news, this is always varies on roster construction. Losing Hassan Whiteside hurts, as we know, but he has been, I don't know if it's worn out welcome or just can't play full minutes. So that's the real question for Portland with him. But they had Bam Adebayo. Thank you. Who was a very good player. And as you mentioned, Myers Leonard looked good last year. So that's a good thing there. Jimmy Butler is obviously just an upgrade. I think same kind of point. Actually, I think I like this team a lot. I think this team has 4 or 5 seed potential. And if there's a breakout year on someone or Justice Winslow is finally healthy, this team could do really well.
Yeah, it's good to mention Winslow. He has been good at times, but hasn't really been healthy yet. So watch for the Heat. Again, like anytime you add a star that's as good as Jimmy Butler, that can really change a team. Orlando Magic, not very much of interest here. I will say they drafted Okeke, if I'm pronouncing that right, who was, considered to be a very good rookie. So watch out for him. But I guess their big move is they paid Vucevic, who we like. He's a really good player. And it seems like they're going to stick with Aaron Gordon and Jonathan Isaac as their forward. So if Gordon at small forward, it might be better for them. But DJ Augustine and Evan Fournier in the backcourt. It seems like the Magic, despite making a few good moves, are probably going to remain mediocre.
And we've liked Al-Farouq Aminu in the past, who they picked up from Portland.
Oh, okay, I missed that. That's a good move.
I think he's older and over the hill at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So
that could help them.
Haven't really done enough But yeah, they got Vucevic. That's something.
Yeah. Wizards losing Jeff Green, that's good, but they also lost Satoransky, Ariza, and Portis. We've talked about them a little bit. They picked up all those guys from LA like Wagner and Bonga. They still have Dwight Howard. I mean, I'm a big believer in Dwight Howard, but he might finally be too old to compete. And
player misses. This is the whole point on Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant. Anytime a player misses a whole season, we don't know what we're getting back.
We just don't know. And then Wall and Beal, kind of the same boat. Like Wall was hurt as well. Beal is a little overpaid, but can still get somewhere. This looks like a big mystery for this team for next year, but I'm not optimistic.
All right, we already discussed that. I don't know if we got. I've got it. We've been going for over an hour, Brian. I don't know. We've still got a lot. How many teams do we have left?
Yeah, we've got a lot of teams. You just want to cut it off, Dre? We're not going to finish tonight?
Well, say we got to the Northwest Division. We already discussed. Oh, why don't we finish the Northwest Division just because we already talked the Nuggets and Jazz? And then I'll let us finish the Northwest Division and the South and the Pacific Division just because we've already filled up a bunch. And then I'll say call that as our show. So we already talked the Nuggets. Minnesota Timberwolves are fascinating. They picked up Noah Vonleh from the Knicks, which is really good.
Very cheap deal.
They picked up Jordan Bell off the discard pile. I forget if Treveon Graham was any good last season. Let me check that. And why don't you run down the others while I'm doing that?
Yeah, so they picked up the other Golden State guys that was part of that Brooklyn deal, right? So yeah, Treveon Graham, Shabazz Napier. Those are kind of average young role players, so it could be interesting. And they drafted a bunch of guys as well. So yeah, to me this is all about Wiggins, right? They're trying to find a way to move Wiggins. They probably won't be able to though, so they're kind of just screwed while they have him. And they're just going to be wasting Towns' best years. Vonleh and Bell are nice pickups, but Timberwolves
basically, as long as they have Wiggins, they're screwed. Like it was the same thing was true of Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, fantastic acquisition, but ended up being for naught because Andrew Wiggins means you're not getting out of the first round of the playoffs. All right, Oklahoma City Thunder, have they done anything? Mike Muscala from LA is all I'm reading.
Alec Burks. So the big thing about them is there's a rumor that they're trying to trade Steven Adams because of luxury tax issues. Luxury tax issues. We'll see if that happens. Terrible decision if they do that. Really, this had a bunch of injuries last year. They need to bring Robertson back and just get healthy, and we'll see if that happens. But they should also try to. What they should do is move Schroeder's contract. He is the weak link on this team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then, yeah, if Robertson is healthy, and we'll have to see what they do with Adams. I mean, that's always the key point is that we don't give any credit for partials, right? If they trade Steven Adams for Robin Lopez or something, right, that would be good for the Bucks, but that's not going to happen.
I think they could get involved in a sign and trade with D'Angelo Russell, maybe. Russell coming here to be their shooting guard. Steven Adams to the Warriors. How about that, Dre?
Oh, yeah, that'd be good. But I'm saying until we see what they do with that, and if they do an intermediary step, we can't really grade that. So I think we have to wait. We haven't talked the Portland Trail Blazers. We kind of talked around them because they've been involved in so much stuff. But they actually, so the Bazemore for Evan Turner trade was just bafflingly bad. Hazanja, man, what is going on with the Knicks, man? They're letting everybody out the door apparently. So I'm trying to see if I can look that up. Why don't you run that down? I just want to look up Hazanja's numbers.
Yeah, so Portland lost all these players we mentioned, right? And also, yeah, Aminu, Seth Curry went to Dallas. He was like 40% three-point shooting last year, I think. And then Enes Kanter as well, who we love. So they lost all those guys and didn't necessarily replace them with very good players. Rodney Hood, and we don't like McCollum that much already. So they still have Damian Lillard, who had a really great year and stepped up, I think, to officially be one of the best point guards in the league. Nurkic had that horrible injury, right? But they brought in Whiteside to replace him. So with Whiteside and Nurkic and Lillard, there's always a chance. But then the rest of the supporting cast is super, super sketchy. I thought Portland kind of overachieved last year, and I would expect they fall down this year. But they've got young players like Zach Collins that could step up, so who knows?
I have to put them in the Memphis Grizzlies point. They're just too many. Bazemore and Tolliver are just not good. Mario Hazanja is not good.
Yeah, Anthony Tolliver's like my age, right? 40 years old. Trey, he's been in the league for a while.
Whiteside is good, but unfortunately, at best, he's just replacing a production of Nurkic and Kanter last season. So this team let some good player, Evan Turner and Myers Leonard out the door is bad. And then the problem is not only they replace them with players that are worse, they replace them with worse players, Bazemore and Tolliver. And I don't know if Whiteside's going to be able to even play. I mean, even missing the last part of the season, I don't know if he's going to be able to replace Nurkic. So is what it is.
Too many questions.
We talked Utah, so that's good. Let's get to Pacific. Obviously, we talked your Warriors. We have not really talked the Clippers. They have not done much other than losing Wilson Chandler and picking up Mo Harkless, if I'm reading this right.
So they made one really big move, which is signing Pat Beverly to a multi-year deal. And he's a really, really good player. If they're going to go with Gilgeous-Alexander and Beverly as their, backcourt of the future with Lou Williams and Shamet still, those are pretty solid guards there. They picked up Harkless from Portland as well. Rumored that Gallinari might be on the go because of his salary. But, of course, we're still waiting for this big shoe to drop of Kawhi Leonard. Maybe he'll go to the Clippers. It's looking more like he won't, but who knows. Harrell is still a good player, too. I love the Clippers. I love what they have and their contracts, but they need that one more big star to make a push. That's Kawhi. Otherwise, they're probably going to be scuffling for the bottom of the playoffs.
All right. We already talked the Lakers, obviously. So we have 2 teams left, Brian, and we can call it a night. And then what I think we just have, damn it, let's just go through it. Let's just do a long one because we only have the Southwest Division. I don't want to.
We're going fast.
All right. That's the good news that we front-loaded this, the teams that were interesting. Phoenix Suns. Oh, my goodness. I love this team, Brian, but I'll let you run it down.
Yeah, so they're coming from a very weak position, obviously, but I don't mind some of the moves they've been making, right? Ricky Rubio could work out, could not. He's an older player like we were talking about. You're not a fan, Dre, but I'm fine with them bringing him in. When you have all this salary cap space, why not bring in a veteran to run the team and, maybe can still be a good player? I'm okay with that. They also got Frank Kaminsky, who he said we don't like. Oh, that's a bad move. But Aaron Baines from Boston, that's pretty good to go along with Ayton, who is a great rookie last year. He should be good. They brought in Sarge from Minnesota, not a guy I've liked in the past, but have been good at times. They drafted Cameron Johnson, who was one of the best rookies, so that could work out. But they have this other big problem of Devin Booker making a lot of money, and we do not like him at all. So interesting team with some interesting young players, also with some really bad contracts, and just generally not a talented roster. I cannot see how they move up this year at all.
Every good move they made was basically countered by a bad.
Yeah,
so
that's
Baines,
such a good way to put it.
Kaminsky, Ricky Rubio at best, I think, is a replacement level player next season, and they have Devin Booker still.
That's good for them, Trey, a replacement player. That's better than most of what they have.
All right, that is fair enough. All right, let's move on to the Sacramento Kings.
So the Kings are that team, right? And so infamously, several years ago when the ownership group led by Vivek Ranadive took over the team, they did this inside, almost like Hard Knocks NBA version where they let someone film their draft room and their draft process, and everyone saw how big of a chaotic nightmare that was. This front office is just crazy. They make all these moves, most of which we don't like, but they got Trevor Ariza, that's pretty good, and Corey Joseph, and Dwayne Dedman, bunch of great defensive players that are veterans that can make your team a lot better. So that's pretty good stuff, right? And then they've already got Bagley, Bielitsa, Buddy Hield, the other Bogdan Bogdanovic, and of course De'Aaron Fox, who took a big step up this year. You're like, man, maybe this team is getting somewhere. But they opened the wallet for Harrison Barnes. That is a complete disaster, on the level of some of these other kind of Klay Thompson and, the Dallas Mavericks, Porzingis kind of deals. That's a tough deal for Kings fans. So Kings could be better, but the roster is still in bad shape, is what I would say.
I would say Harrison Barnes is what tanked him because, they were to a playoff team last season. Willie Cauley-Stein was kind of bad, but Dwayne Dedman is fine. Not, an upgrade or a replacement. But Harrison Barnes is just really bad. And part of the reason they didn't notice it as much last year is that he played 1,500 minutes for Dallas and only 900 minutes for them, but he was terrible in that. So that is just going to hurt him. Yeah, I wouldn't expect too much.
I like the idea of what they're doing, mixing some veterans that are defenders with young players, but their execution is just not there. Okay, you ready for Dallas Mavericks?
Dallas Mavericks, let's do it.
So, yeah, they did bring in Seth Curry like we were talking about. I love that personally. Again, if you're paying him like $10 million a year to shoot 40% from three, or it's probably going to be 36, 37 more realistically, that's pretty good. He's the kind of, solid wing player you want, not maxing all these crappy guys out that can't shoot. So that was a pretty good deal for them. As we mentioned, Porzingis, that is one of, if not the worst deals. He's a guy that's been hurt and has never really played well in his young career, and I think has sexual assault allegations too. So why do you take that big of a risk? I'm not a big fan of that. But they brought Dwight Powell back, who they never really give enough minutes to, but we really like. If they're just going to start him at center next year, that's a good move for them. But I have a similar comment to the Mavericks as the Kings. They make interesting moves here and there, but the bad moves cancel them out. And there's just not enough talent here. It seems like they're really relying on Doncic to just be the superstar stud, and he could get there. He was pretty damn good as a rookie, but there's a lot of ground to make up for the Mavericks.
Doncic, Jackson, and Powell is a really strong three to have on your starting. And they have some decent players off the bench, but as you noted, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Kristaps Porzingis are just not good players. And Kristaps Porzingis, I'm prepared. I think I've done 2 years, so I'll probably try and do 3, Ryan, where I talk about overhyped players. And what I note about overhyped players lists is that there is a good chance, just because this is statistics, that I'm about 75% right, which means I'm usually wrong on. Right. I'll say Kyrie Irving is so overrated, then Brad Stevens like, oh yeah, and so I'm watching you. That was my Kemba Walker point. I'm like. Insult an overrated guard going to Brad Stevens at your own peril. He has made Kyrie Irving and Isaiah Thomas look like MVPs, Brian.
I love that point.
I'm prepared to eat crow on Kristaps Porzingis, but one, we thought he was overrated before he got this deal. He missed almost a full season before getting this deal, and then it makes it even harder. As you know, there are all these allegations, so they might end up in a boat where they have to, of all the franchises to decide to back this horse, this one with all the problems they had in the last couple of years is an interesting one. And I'll leave it alone. As we talked Kristaps Porzingis into sexual assault allegations a while back, and I kind of noted that the ideal world would be we let the facts out and there is not basically a bunch of people looking in ahead of time, because every time this happens with a pro athlete, it never ends up well, because it's just become such a media circus that we do not get what we want out of it. And even when it's obvious one way or the other, it is just frustrating. I'm sticking with the victim for what it's worth, but I'm just saying it doesn't end well for anybody. Nobody's going to be happy at the end, and we don't even know. So Kristaps Porzingis, we just view that's the running theme. If your team gave a lot of money to a player and you weren't the Brooklyn Nets, we are like, what are you doing? So I agree. The Dallas Mavericks, they have a shot. If Tim Hardaway or Kristaps Porzingis has some upside or gets benched in lieu of another player, maybe. But I think they'll be a middling team, if not a lottery team.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're going to be Curry and Doncic as their starting backcourt, but who knows?
That would be good. Houston Rockets, they made one mistake, Brian. I don't know if it's on here. They gave Austin Rivers an extension.
Yes, they did. And even though it's not a big money extension, I think it's like 2 years, $15 million, or 2 years, $20 million. You don't want him on your team. Giving him any minutes at all is rough. Same with Eric Gordon. So if they can somehow get rid of Eric Gordon, it'll be a good offseason. But they've basically done nothing so far than that, right? There was rumors that Chris Paul was going to demand a trade and be gone. That seems to have died down now. There's rumors that Clint Capella, I'm not pronouncing these very well today. Let's keep going. That Clint Capella was going to be moved out so they could try to use that money to bring in Jimmy Butler. Obviously, he went to the Heat. I don't know if that still could happen, but maybe the Rockets will just not make any big moves at all, but who knows? There's still some time. Notable that Kenneth Faried is a big unrestricted free agent of theirs. Where he goes could be interesting. I still think he could make a difference somewhere. Nene is gone for sure, though. Him, not so much. He's now in his late 30s.
All right. I think I would say the following also on the Houston Rockets. They're very much like the Toronto Raptors. We're hearing rumors, like you mentioned, Clint Capella, Chris Paul. You said at the very top of the show, things may be very different opening day. If they've got a move or two in them this offseason that we haven't seen, that's going to change everything. So we'll have to wait. But I'm just inclined to believe they shut their window, because re-signing Austin Rivers is almost just like admitting defeat. It's like, screw it. The two stories I have to write are already on the queue. I have a couple. The Warriors were not light years ahead, clearly, is the first one. Then the anti-Moneyball Rockets, because the Rockets got all the star players that everybody wants and just cannot, for the life of them, sign underrated or cheap role players worth a damn. We already talked the Memphis Grizzlies. This is a fun one, Brian. This team fell to the bottom, but the New Orleans Pelicans, I am mostly optimistic about them.
I'm very optimistic about them. Well, so the one thing about them is they were an okay team last year because they had Anthony Davis. But if you think about last year's New Orleans Pelicans without Anthony Davis, that is like a just total dearth of talent. So they had a big ladder to climb up. And the guys they brought back, of course, were, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, and then draft picks. Well, Lonzo Ball and Josh Hart, maybe. Brandon Ingram, not so much. So they have a long way to climb. But in addition to that, at guard, they still have Drew Holiday, and they brought in J.J. Redick, which is, an okay veteran presence to have. Of course, the big elephant in the room is Zion Williamson, maybe the best rookie ever, in terms of college numbers. So it's going to be really interesting to see how good he is. The more and more you look at his numbers and watch him play, the better he gets, in my opinion. Like, he's just really, really good. And we talked about they made that great trade on draft day where they got extra value from the Hawks. And they used that to bring in Jackson Hayes, who's also one of the best players in college. So they got two of the best rookies. That's pretty nice. Derek Favors is another really, really good signing. They can just plug him in at center. I'm sure they're going to start Zion at power forward. So, yeah, this is, again, a team. I mean, who knows how good these young guys will be. Maybe they'll compete for the playoffs, maybe not. They're certainly headed in the right direction, and I can see a ton of room for variance there. Let's see. It looks like we might have lost Dre. We'll see if he comes back, but we'll crank through it real fast. We got one more team to go through, guys. We've been going for about an hour 45 now. The Spurs have not made very many moves either yet. They've, brought in a bunch of rookies, who I'm surprised they passed on some good players in the draft, but they did sign Lukas Samanic, a European player, and the Spurs international scouting, is something to behold. So they may end up being good. DeMar Carroll is kind of the only guy worth mentioning that they brought in so far. So, yeah, San Antonio is not an easy location to recruit free agents from, especially, considering it's a small market team that doesn't pay a lot of money, and you have to fit in their system. They're not going to give you a bunch of freedom with Popovich. So, yeah, it's looking like a tough one. And it looks like, Dre is officially out. So I'm just I guess I'll call him back to try to finish the show here. Let's see if he wants to come back onto the show. We'll play our little Skype music here, see if he's available. All right, we're not going to get Dre back. So let's take the show out here without him. This has been the Boxscore Geeks show. You can follow me on Twitter at BoxscoreBrian. You can follow our host, Dre Alvarez, at NerdNumbers on Twitter. You can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, everywhere else. We usually film this show on Mondays, sometimes on Tuesdays, 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific time. And that has been the Boxscore Geeks show. I'll give a shout out to all the NBA players that got paid. I saw a statistic that the NBA players were paid over $3 billion in total just in that first day, assuming all these deals go through. So it's great to see that the money that the league is making going through to those players. I've accused the owners of being rent seekers at times, so it's good to see that happening. Anyway, that's it. We will talk to you guys next time.